Mythology of Japan. Japanese mythology begins before Japan itself existed. According to the legends, the world was nothing more than a sea of chaos until the two deities, Izanagi and Izanami, appeared. They used a sacred spear to stir the sea, and when they lifted it, droplets fell and formed the very first island. From there, the islands of Japan began to emerge. From these two deities came dozens of other figures, but the most famous were Amaterasu, the Lady of the Sun, who is said to be the ancestor of Japan's emperors, Susanoo, the Lord of Storms, known for his rebellious nature, and Tsukuyomi, the Lord of the Moon. One of the most famous stories in Japanese mythology tells of Amaterasu hiding inside a cave after a conflict with Susanoo, causing the world to be plunged into darkness. She only came out after the other deities gathered outside the cave and held a lively celebration, sparking her curiosity. When she emerged, light returned to the world. What makes Japanese mythology unique is that it does not focus only on distant deities. It also believes in the existence of the kami, sacred spirits that are believed to dwell in mountains, rivers, trees, and even certain places. As a result, nature itself became an essential part of Japanese belief and culture. Egyptian mythology. Egyptian mythology begins before Egypt itself existed. According to the legends, the universe was nothing more than an endless sea of water called Nun. There was no land, no sky, and not even the sun. From the heart of these waters emerged the deity Ra, the Lord of the Sun, who brought light, allowing the land to appear, and the world to begin its journey. As time passed, figures emerged who became the most famous in Egyptian mythology, such as Osiris, the Lord of the Afterlife, Isis, the Lady of Magic, Set, the Lord of Chaos, and Horus, the Lord of the Sky. One of the most famous stories in Egyptian mythology tells of Set killing his brother Osiris in his desire to seize the throne, but Isis gathered the pieces of his body and brought him back to life. Later, Horus grew up to confront Set and reclaim his father's rightful place on the throne. What makes Egyptian mythology unique is that it did not focus only on life, but also on what happens after death. The ancient Egyptians believed that a person's heart would be weighed against the feather of Ma'at, the symbol of truth and justice, and that the fate of the soul would be determined by the outcome of this judgment. As a result, the sun, the Nile River, the pharaoh, and the afterlife became essential parts of ancient Egyptian belief and culture. Norse mythology. Imagine that the end of the world is not just a legend, but a certain event that everyone awaits. This is the idea at the heart of Norse mythology, one of the most famous mythologies of ancient Europe. But long before that, there was no world and no humans. There was only a vast void known as Ginnungagap, lying between a kingdom of ice and another of fire. When these two forces met, the giant Ymir, the first being in the universe, was born, and from him, the story of creation began. Later came Odin, who became the chief of the gods, alongside his son Thor, the Lord of Thunder, and wielder of the legendary hammer, Loki, known for his cunning and deception, and Freya, the Lady of Love and Beauty. One of the most famous events in Norse mythology is the prophecy of Ragnarok, the final battle in which the gods face giants and monsters in a conflict that destroys the world. Thor battles the giant serpent Jörmungandr, while Odin confronts the wolf Fenrir, before everything comes to an end, only for a new world to begin once again. What makes Norse mythology unique is that it did not see the end as something to escape from. Instead, it believed that courage and fighting until the very last moment were the greatest achievements a person could attain. This is why Valhalla held such a great place in Norse mythology. The Vikings believed that a warrior who died bravely on the battlefield would be chosen by the Valkyries and taken to Valhalla, Odin's great hall, where he would spend his days fighting, training, and celebrating in preparation for the final battle, Ragnarok. This mythology was followed by the Norse peoples, most notably the Vikings, who lived in Scandinavia before the spread of Christianity, and it became an essential part of their culture and way of life. Maya mythology. Imagine that humans were not created from clay or earth, but from corn. This is the idea at the heart of Maya mythology, one of the richest mythologies of the ancient civilizations of the Americas. But before humans appeared, there was only the sky and the sea, while the earth was covered in darkness. Then, the gods came together and decided to create a new world. Mountains, forests, and rivers appeared, and the search began for a creature that could worship them and remember their names. The gods first tried to create humans from clay, but they were weak and soon fell apart. Then, they created them from wood, but they had no souls or emotions, so they were punished and destroyed. Finally, humans were created from corn dough, and from that moment on, humans became what we know them to be today. One of the most famous stories in Maya mythology is the journey of the hero twins, who descended into the underworld known as Xibalba. There, they faced a series of trials and traps prepared by the rulers of that world. In the end, they succeeded in defeating them and became symbols of victory over death. The Maya also believed in several important gods, such as Kukulkan, the feathered serpent god, Chak, the god of rain, and Itsamna, the chief of the gods. They were associated with agriculture, rain, the sky, and the continuation of life. The Maya people believed in this mythology for many centuries and built massive pyramids and temples to perform religious rituals. They were also famous for their precise astronomical calendars. Later, their name became associated with the myth that the world would end in 2012. However, the Maya civilization never actually predicted the end of the world. Instead, they viewed it as the beginning of a new cycle of time. Greek mythology. In Greek mythology, the gods were split into 3 generations: the primordial gods and the Titans and the Olympians. At the beginning, there was no sky, no earth, no sea, not even time. There was only one thing called chaos. Complete nothingness, an endless void with no life and no order. Out of that void came the first beings. Gaia, the earth. Then came Tartarus, the dark underworld, followed by Eros, the force that gave living things the power to reproduce. Then the darkness and night came. Then Gaia gave birth to the sky, which they named Uranus. Together, they gave birth to a race of giants known as the Titans. But Uranus feared his own children, so he imprisoned them deep inside the earth as soon as they were born. But Gaia couldn't take it anymore. So she gave her youngest son Cronus a huge sickle and convinced him to rebel against his father. When the chance came, Cronus attacked Uranus and overthrew him, and he cut his, and became the new ruler of the universe. Later, Cronus married his sister Rhea, but he was terrified of his own children because of a prophecy that said one of them would overthrow him, just like he had overthrown his father. So every time Rhea gave birth, he swallowed the baby. But Rhea refused to lose her last child. She secretly hid the baby Zeus on the island of Crete and gave Cronus a rock wrapped in cloth instead. Cronus swallowed it, thinking it was his son. Zeus grew up in secret, and once he was strong enough, he came back to get revenge. He forced Cronus to spit out all of his brothers and sisters, and together they fought a massive war against the Titans that lasted 10 years, known as the Titanomachy. In the end, Zeus won. He locked the Titans away in Tartarus and divided the world between himself and his 2 brothers. Zeus became ruler of the sky, and Poseidon became lord of the seas, and Hades became ruler of the underworld. And from that point on, the most famous stories of Greek mythology began: the age of the gods of Mount Olympus, and legendary heroes and terrifying monsters, whose stories are still told today. Chinese mythology. In Chinese mythology, the beginning of the world is completely different from most other mythologies. According to their legends, the universe didn't begin with water or an endless void. Instead, it all started with a giant cosmic egg that contained the sky and the earth, and it stayed that way for thousands of years. Then, from inside that egg, Pangu, the lord of creation, was born. And when he finally awoke, he picked up his giant axe and split the egg in 2 pieces. The lighter half rose to become the sky, while the heavier half sank to become the earth. But Pangu feared that the sky and the earth would come back together again. So he stood between them for thousands of years, pushing the sky higher while keeping the earth firmly in its place, until the world finally became the way we know it today. After he had finished his task, Pangu fell dead. But his death wasn't the end of his story. It was the beginning of the world. His breath became the wind and the clouds, and his right eye became the sun, and his left eye became the moon. His blood turned into rivers, and his bones became mountains, and his hair became trees and plants. Once the world was ready, the goddess Nuwa, the creator of humanity, appeared. She looked across the earth but found no one to live on it. So she gathered clay from the riverbanks, shaped the very first human, and breathed life into it, marking the beginning of humanity. But the peace didn't last for long. A massive war broke out among the gods. And during the battle, one of the pillars that holding up the sky was destroyed. The sky began to tilt, and fires spread across the land, and floods swept through the world, and life on Earth was on the verge of extinction. That's when Nuwa decided to save the world. She gathered 5 colored stones, melted them down, and used them to repair the sky. Then she took the legs of a giant turtle and used them as new pillars to hold up the sky. Balance was restored, and humanity was saved from destruction. And this became one of the most famous stories in Chinese mythology. This explains the origin of the world and humanity. Also reinforced the belief that the survival of the universe depends on the balance between the sky, the earth, nature, and humanity. Persian mythology. Before we dive into Persian mythology, go grab yourself a cup of tea because this one might leave your head spinning. All right, let's get started. In the beginning, the world was divided into two separate realms. Above was a world of endless light, home to Ahura Mazda, the Lord of wisdom and goodness. Below was a world of darkness, where Angra Mainyu lived, also known as Ahriman, the spirit of evil and destruction. Between these two worlds lay a vast emptiness, and neither side could reach the other. But Ahura Mazda knew that one day Ahriman would try to invade the world of light, so he began preparing his creation to face the coming evil. First, he created the sky, surrounding the world like a mighty fortress. Then he created the waters, followed by the earth, the plants, and the animals. Finally, he created the first human, Gayamart, a great and radiant man who became the ancestor of all humanity. Zoroastrian traditions also speak of the primordial bull as one of the earliest beneficial creatures. At first, the world was perfect. There was no disease, no hunger, and no death. But when Ahriman saw the world of light, he was consumed by hatred and decided to destroy everything Ahura Mazda had created. He broke through the sky and unleashed his demons into the world and spread disease and disasters. Then he attacked the primordial bull and killed it and brought death to Gayamart. But evil couldn't put an end to life. From the primordial bull seed came the animals and the beneficial plants. And from the lineage of Gayamart came the first man and woman, and from them, humanity spread across the earth. From that moment on, the world was no longer as pure as it had once been. Instead, it became a vast battlefield between the light and the darkness. Humans were not just witnesses to this conflict. Every person had a role to play. Every honest word and every good thought and every righteous deed strengthened the world of light. But every lie and every act of injustice and every act of corruption made Ahriman stronger. As time went on, many stories emerged across Persia that reflected this eternal struggle. One of the most famous is the story of King Jamshid and the tyrant King Zahak. Jamshid was a powerful and just king. Under his rule, the people lived through an age of prosperity and abundance. But over the years, pride consumed him. He claimed that all the glory and prosperity of the kingdom were his alone. Because of his arrogance, he lost his divine glory, and the people turned against him. Zahak took advantage of his weakness, and he defeated him and seized the throne of Persia. But Ahriman wasn't finished yet. He returned to Zahak disguised as a skilled chef, and served him meals unlike anything he had ever tasted, quickly earning his trust. Then he asked Zahak to let him kiss both of his shoulders as a reward. The moment he did, Ahriman vanished, and two terrifying black snakes grew out of Zahak's shoulders. The physicians tried to get rid of the snakes, but they couldn't. So Ahriman returned once again, but this time disguised as a physician. He told Zahak that the only way to calm the snakes was to feed them the brains of two young men every single day. From that day on, the land was consumed by fear, as Zahak's soldiers killed two young men every day to feed the snakes. Then one night, he had a terrifying vision. It said that a young man named Faradun would end his reign. So he ordered his soldiers to hunt him down and kill him. But his mother hid him away, where he was raised by a magical cow named Barmaya. Around that time, a brave blacksmith named Kaveh had already lost most of his sons after Zahak had them killed to feed the snakes. And when it was finally his last son's turn, Kaveh stormed into the king's palace and refused to bow to his tyranny. The people gathered around Kaveh, and together they set out to find Faradun. Faradun then led them against Zahak, and after a fierce battle, he defeated the tyrant. But he didn't kill him. Instead, he bound him in chains and imprisoned him inside Mount Damavand, where he would remain until the end of the time. And that's the end of the video. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to like and subscribe. See you later.